Have you ever been completely alone and suddenly found yourself having a full conversation? You ask yourself a question, you answer it, then you argue with your own answer. Maybe you replay something someone said earlier. Maybe you imagine a conversation that hasn't even happened yet, and sometimes you even catch yourself saying the words out loud. So here's the strange question. Why does your brain keep talking when nobody else is there? Is it overthinking? Is it loneliness? Is it just a weird habit? Or is your brain actually doing something much more important? Because the voice inside your head isn't random. In many situations, it's your brain's way of organizing information, processing emotions, predicting the future, and making sense of your experiences. And once you understand what's happening, you may never look at your private conversations the same way again. 1. Your brain uses words to organize chaos. Imagine your mind as a room filled with hundreds of objects, memories, emotions, plans, fears, questions, random observations. Everything is mixed together. Now imagine trying to organize that room without labels. It's difficult. But language gives your brain labels. When you put a thought into words, you make it easier to examine. Instead of simply feeling nervous, you might think, I'm nervous because I don't know what they're going to say. That's a major difference. The emotion was vague. The sentence gives it structure. This is one reason people often talk themselves through difficult situations. They're not necessarily trying to entertain themselves. They're trying to turn something complicated into something understandable. That's why you might say, let's think about this. Even though you're technically talking to yourself, you're giving your thoughts a structure your brain can work with. And sometimes simply putting an unclear thought into words makes the problem feel smaller. 2. Your brain rehearses the future. Here's where things get really interesting. Your brain doesn't only think about what is happening right now, it constantly predicts what might happen next. That's why you sometimes have imaginary conversations. You might imagine what you'll say to your boss, how you'll respond to a difficult person, what you'll say on a first date, how you'll explain yourself during an argument, or even how someone might react to something you haven't told them yet. The conversation hasn't happened, but your brain is already practicing. Why? Because preparation can reduce uncertainty. Your mind creates possible scenarios and mentally tests different responses. It's almost like running a simulation. You think, if they say this, I'll say that. Then your brain generates another possibility. But what if they respond differently? And suddenly you're having a conversation with someone who isn't even there. It may feel strange, but your brain is essentially asking, can I be ready for this? 3. Sometimes you're not talking to yourself. You're talking to a memory. Have you ever replayed an old conversation? Maybe something happened 3 days ago. You thought you were completely over it. Then you're brushing your teeth, walking outside, lying in bed, and suddenly your brain plays the conversation again. But this time you say something different. You think, I should have said that, or why did I respond like that? This happens because memory isn't simply a video recording that your brain plays back perfectly. When you remember an experience, your brain reconstructs aspects of it, and emotional experiences can be especially persistent. If a conversation involved embarrassment, anger, excitement, rejection, regret, or uncertainty, your brain may keep returning to it because something about the experience still feels unresolved. Your mind may be asking, what happened? What did I miss? What should I do differently next time? The conversation is over, but your brain may still be trying to understand it. 4. Your inner voice can help you control your behavior. Now think about a moment when you were extremely frustrated. Maybe someone annoyed you. Your first impulse was to respond immediately, but another thought appeared. Don't say it. That little sentence can completely change what happens next. Your brain can use internal speech as a form of self-regulation. Instead of immediately following an emotion, you create a small mental pause. You tell yourself, stay calm. Think first. Walk away. Don't make this worse. That's powerful because emotions can push us toward immediate reactions. Internal dialogue can create distance between the feeling and the action. And sometimes that tiny pause is the difference between making a decision you'll be proud of and making one you'll regret 5 minutes later. 5. Sometimes your brain is trying to make sense of your emotions. There's another reason people talk to themselves. They don't always know exactly what they're feeling. You might think you're angry, but after thinking about it, you realize you're actually disappointed. You might think you're lonely, but maybe you're really missing one specific person. You might think you're frustrated with someone else when you're actually frustrated with yourself. This is why internal conversations can become deeper than simple questions and answers. Your brain is trying to identify the emotion underneath the emotion, and language can help. You start with, I'm upset. Then, why am I upset? Then, because they ignored me. Then, why does that bother me so much? And eventually, you may discover something you hadn't consciously recognized before. The conversation wasn't pointless, it was a path toward understanding yourself. 6. Your brain sometimes becomes your own coach. Think about the moments when nobody is encouraging you. You're tired, you're discouraged, you have something difficult to finish, and suddenly you tell yourself, come on, just do it. You've done harder things before, one step at a time. That is another form of internal dialogue. Your brain can generate instructions, encouragement, warnings, and reminders. And interestingly, the way you speak to yourself can influence how you approach a challenge. Compare these two thoughts. I'm terrible at this, and I'm still learning this. The situation hasn't changed, but the interpretation has. One closes the door, the other leaves room for action. This is why your internal voice deserves attention, because you hear it more often than you hear anyone else. 7. Sometimes you're trying to get closure. This might be one of the most emotional reasons. Sometimes the person you're talking to in your head isn't physically present anymore. Maybe they're far away. Maybe the relationship ended. Maybe you never got to say what you wanted to say. Maybe the conversation ended before you were ready. So your brain creates another version of it. You explain yourself. You ask questions. You imagine their response. You finally say the sentence you couldn't say at the time. This doesn't necessarily mean you want the past back. Sometimes it simply means your mind is trying to create an ending that reality never gave you. But there's an important difference. Thinking about the past can help you understand it, but repeatedly replaying the same conversation without reaching any new understanding can become exhausting. At that point, the goal isn't to find the perfect sentence. The goal may be accepting that the conversation is already over. 8. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between thinking and speaking as much as you expect. Here's something surprisingly simple. When you're thinking about an action, your brain can become highly active even before you physically do anything. That's why people sometimes move their lips while thinking, whisper instructions to themselves, read something out loud, or quietly repeat a sentence before saying it to another person. Speaking can make thoughts more concrete. It gives the thought a physical form. You can hear it, you can evaluate it, you can correct it. And that's why talking to yourself isn't automatically a sign that something is wrong. Context matters. A person thinking aloud while solving a problem is very different from experiencing something frightening or uncontrollable. Human behavior has to be understood in context. 9. The most important part, your inner voice can become a habit. Here's something worth paying attention to. If you repeatedly talk to yourself in a certain way, your brain becomes familiar with that pattern. Imagine someone constantly telling themselves, I'm not good enough. Everyone is judging me. I'll probably fail. Over time, those thoughts can become automatic. Now imagine replacing them with more realistic statements. I don't know what will happen yet. I can handle one step at a time. Making a mistake doesn't define me. That's not pretending everything is perfect. It's simply choosing a more useful interpretation. You don't need to become unrealistically positive. You need to become more accurate. Instead of, everything will go wrong. Try. I don't know how this will go, but I'll deal with what happens. That's a much stronger conversation. 10. So, should you stop talking to yourself? Not necessarily. The better question is, what is your inner voice doing for you? Is it helping you solve a problem, preparing you for something difficult, processing an emotional experience, encouraging you, organizing your thoughts? Or is it constantly attacking you? Because the goal isn't to silence every thought. That's impossible. The goal is to understand your thoughts instead of automatically believing every one of them. Your brain will produce ideas. Your job is to decide which ones deserve your attention. Conclusion. So the next time you're alone and suddenly realize you're having an entire conversation with yourself, don't immediately think, why am I so weird? Instead, pause and ask, what is my brain trying to do right now? Maybe you're solving a problem. Maybe you're preparing for the future. Maybe you're processing an emotion. Maybe you're replaying something that still feels unfinished. Or maybe you're simply organizing the thousands of thoughts moving through your mind. Your inner voice isn't just noise. Sometimes it's your brain trying to understand your life. But remember one thing, you are not every thought you think. A thought can appear without being true. A fear can appear without becoming reality. A memory can return without needing to control your present. And an inner conversation can happen without requiring an immediate answer. So listen to your mind, but don't let every thought become your master. Because the moment you learn to observe your inner voice instead of automatically obeying it, you begin to understand something much more powerful. Your mind isn't just something you have, it's something you can learn to understand. And that may be one of the most important conversations you ever have. If this made you look at your own thoughts differently, subscribe for more psychology videos that reveal the hidden patterns behind everyday human behavior. Because sometimes, the most fascinating person to understand is the one talking inside your own head.